we chose to create a new data discovery product called Oracle Big Data Discovery. And you'll see here some of what were in essence the vision materials that were used to engage with customers, potential customers, partners, other folks in the Oracle ecosystem. I haven't said much about vision in relation to product strategy. You'll often hear that it all starts with vision or vision is the primary motivator. I, in fact, think that the reality is a little bit more nuanced than that. But in this case, it's useful to see some of the way that we captured and communicated what you think of as the vision for how we would fulfill or follow through on or realize the product strategy. In this case, we are trying to capture and communicate the idea that there's substantial change in the technology landscape, and this creates opportunity, but also, given the state of the space, remember, it's still very much an emerging space, it creates certain problems, or what you can see is that there are weaknesses with point solutions and the existing analytic tooling, and specifically, if you have the need to be doing modeling, driving data science, driving these sorts of machine intelligence offerings later down in the business cycle and the chain of value, then you have limitations on the tooling that you can use and what's available. This adds up to essentially the need for a fundamentally new approach, and you can see here that we are reflecting both the new role and the new product category that we had discovered while we were working with and using that customer-centric toolkit. And in fact, the idea of specific activities and capabilities around exploration, transformation, et cetera, are directly surfaced here in this driving vision narrative. And then here's what it would look like. So as part of the vision process, and then to keep folks who were interested or participating in the product development process aware, and also to give us something to signal to customers, well,
My
people put
company
together
built a
nifty
data
videos.
reservoir in Hadoop to capture billions of big data transactions. It helps us answer completely new questions like, how does consumer sentiment impact sales? However, unlike our data warehouse, data in Hadoop lacks structure and isn't nicely curated, which is why we spent 80% of our time wrestling with data and only 20% analyzing it. And the tools we used were complex, not integrated, and only for experts. All that changed when we implemented Oracle Big Data Discovery. Now we have a single product to quickly turn raw data in Hadoop into actionable insight. The visual interface enables anyone to find, explore, and transform data in Hadoop, discover new insights, then share the results. It makes our data scientists' life a lot easier, and you don't need specialized skills, so our business analysts can use it too. Let's take a look. First, it registers everything in Hadoop into a rich catalog to find data like shopping online. Next, Explore shows how the data looks. We can visualize the attributes, sorted by their potential, and combine them to see how they relate. Raw data typically requires manipulation. Transform lets us easily change data using an extensive library of transformations and enrichments. Now I can put analytics together by dropping components on the page to summarize data. Anything from a basic table to a sophisticated visualization. Full-featured search helps me find patterns, and intuitive navigation walks me through the results. Then I can add and relate more data, expanding my analysis. Finally, I share my work and collaborate with the team. I can even publish transformed data back to Hadoop for use in other tools like R, Hive, and Oracle Big Data SQL. Oracle Big Data Discovery supercharges your ability to get fast answers from big data. So you can spend 80% of your time analyzing, the way life should be. Oracle Big Data Discovery, immediate value from Hadoop.
So there's that value proposition, and you can see all of that product discovery work reflected basically directly in the marketing and the promotional materials, this particular vision piece. All right, so I promised machine intelligence. Let's take a look and dive in a little bit and see where and how, in addition to the idea of providing capability to power and develop machine intelligence, a whole host of machine intelligence features, functions, and tooling were actually built into the product. We've seen essentially what it looked like from the customer view, sort of on the level of the glass, as we said at the time. But if we go back to some of those primary learnings directly from data science and data scientists, we had a good level of specific visibility into the machine learning techniques that those folks were using to do their analytical work to participate in the machine intelligence cycle itself. And so you'll see here named a bunch of things that were then current, right, under that heading of how data analysis, right, and data modeling was driven and actually taking place. And so, for example, we can see folks saying that it actually would be really useful to identify outliers, invalid data, to spot data quality issues. And this was also a beginning way that they could look for patterns or anti-patterns in the data itself. And a lot of that was being done by hand. So essentially, there was little or no tooling to support doing that, even though the scale of the data sets uh, that folks were taking on was rising dramatically and rapidly. And so if you look at the way that the features, the hookers, and the capability for that finding set of tooling, so one of those four key modes is described, you can see that a lot of those machine learning techniques actually were surfaced and used in a customer value sense to provide recommendations and annotations and data set summaries about when, where, and how analysts should even engage in the first place. Many of them were built into the search and navigation interaction model around identifying data sets, subsets of data, et cetera. So marshaling data to put it into your workbench to be working with. And then also to drive automatic enrichment around things like recognizing known entities, extracting and identifying vocabulary, profiling sentiment, value judgments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then in addition, when you look ahead to a more sustained engagement, so exploration, these then are some of the verbatim from customers, from data science and data scientists and analytical folks on what kinds of descriptive visualizations or statistical tooling would be useful to look at and get a sense of, data set as an overview, how to do exploration, et cetera. And so a lot of that is built into what you think of as that explore mode, right, or that bucket of explore capability. And so this is where some of the math around information gain and information potential, some of those entropic calculations about which subsets of a very large pool of data. So again, we take a sample of 500,000, a million, 10 million records out of a bucket of 100 million or a billion, right? And then what could we learn and show about things like data quality? What statistical tools could we apply? What correlations could we begin to see between attribute, right, values and combinations? And then in the transformation mode, again, there's a whole library of techniques that was driven by needs to manipulate data, right? So to augment and improve data quality, right? To do the wrangling itself. And that included enriching with quite a comprehensive tool set for detailed data level enrichments. And then when analysis itself was the focus, you can, again, looking at some of the voice of customers specifically and what was needed, you can see we're including some of the more advanced machine learning techniques, right? So support vector machine, Bayesian classifiers. We're doing language processing directly, working with then current generations of neural networks. So this is before transformers, but there were still a whole host of neural network approaches that were relevant and were coming online. And then basics like Markov models, decision trees, area under the curve. And in terms of features and functions and where these surface on the glass and or where you're interacting directly with and marshaling those tools, that's more when you were zooming into that analysis mode. And then you would see essentially what we were trying to enable was drag and drop or rapid visually driven analysis. And then a combination across these different data sets. And so looking ahead at not just those core capabilities, but how you would share and collaborate, right? And work across not just the discovery cycle, but other cycles. Even in the space when you were looking to publish, right, and you were going to publish back into the original corpus in Hadoop, there's a whole set of transformations and enrichments that would be driven by or directly done by the discovery product itself. Cycle time on this, soup to nuts, from opportunity assessment to new comprehensive product in market with that robust set of capability, which was the first brand new offering from Oracle in this space, being natively originated, was about 14 months. So then, inevitably, the question becomes, what next? And I hope that uh, through the lens of seeing product strategy as a cycle, you can see that that view allows us to understand that healthy product development means you're always doing and thinking strategy. And specifically, you're always somewhere in the product strategy cycle. And that may be with your current product. It may be as you look ahead to offering your first product. You're always looking around, trying to understand the current situation, and then trying to chart a course. And you might be doing that for a basket of products, right, or a portfolio of interconnected products that are at different stages of the cycle at the same time. So how to reconcile that and how to sort of get a handle on that complexity is to, I think, quite clearly look for a source of gravity and find a North Star that you can use to chart a course, right? And one that is maybe a common course or that aligns the evolution paths of those individual products or those different things in the portfolio. And that's where customer centricity becomes especially powerful and useful. So, with that lens, let's look at specifically what, where, and how we turned back to the beginning of the cycle, if you will, or we revisit the opportunity assessment stage. Looking ahead, we had already defined wave one for visual discovery and analysis tools. And so the question was, well, what would wave two be, or how would the category evolve? And so the core of that, we thought, would be augmented discovery, so full capability discovery analysis, but across the whole data corpus. So not just, for example, the data that was resident in Hadoop-based reservoirs or as they were identified at the time, data lakes, right? So these new multi-structured, polystructured, semi-structured collections of data, but across the full business data corpus. And by that, we mean everything that you've had on file from your last 20 years, from all of your different systems of record, et cetera, right? So sort of the next level or the next horizon of both scale and complexity in terms of covering the entire business. We thought the way that that would be addressed would be with a toolkit that mixed automated and semi-automated analytical techniques, clustering, machine learning, et cetera, right? And the whole new generation of machine learning techniques that had been developed, even in the last year or two, as a way of managing analysis, actually doing analysis, but also then doing those things like directing analyst attention. However, in the course of surveying and mapping this out, again, using that quick set of iterative cycles of lean strategy, what we realized is that this was really a space that was at the pioneer stage. And so if you think about the S curve and how technologies typically develop and evolve, this was even before the wild west of emerging spaces. It was clearly a pioneer stage. And so the specifics of the capabilities that people would be needing, when, where, and how they would find value, so what the value propositions were, and even how some of this stuff was happening was unknown or was dynamic in a way that didn't seem as suitable, right? So we didn't see as much opportunity here. However, bringing that customer-centered viewpoint in and taking a look at what we had seen when we were working on identifying and understanding wave one, right? So doing the initial category definition, we chose to zoom in and look at the overlap or the intersection of those new roles. So we'd been focused on data analysis, but there was potentially opportunity where data engineering and data analysis would overlap. And you can see that shown here in the middle of the workflow diagram, right? And so we had done what you would think of as offering some capability, right? Some product development focused on wrangling and that part of the cycle. But featurization was a new area, relatively speaking. And so when we worked with customers and we collected essentially what you would think of as customer feedback, we heard a lot of things like this. And so these again are some direct quotes. Oh, the transformations that you're offering are for feature engineering, right? What other goals would you have for the transformation? In fact, I'm assuming that the only reason that you provided these transformation capabilities, right, so those augmentation and wrangling capabilities, was in order to enable feature engineering. So in that customer-centered view, we had a pretty clear direction, right, and a pretty clear understanding of the customer's mindset and interpretation. So this allowed us to say, well, yes, we believe there is enough opportunity to be motivated to do specific product discovery in that space. And so we began looking at feature selection. And if you are tracking the dates on these slides here, you'll recall that the vision piece, right? So that vision deck was dated just a month or two before. This is November of 2014. That was September. And so what you can see again is that even as product development is happening and you're essentially in build, strategy is trying to chart a course and figure out, well, what next and where next. So looking at feature selection, if you're not close to the space, it's actually that stage or that moment or that series when a very particular set of characteristics within the data, patterns, et cetera, right, are chosen in order to focus on and really drive and be the source of leverage for model construction. So feature selection specifically is a subset of working with features. It's different than feature engineering, et cetera, right, feature extraction. And it's meant specifically to empower and enable and accelerate modeling. So did we have pain? Yes, we did. So we knew that getting the data ready to do feature selection was in fact very difficult. But once that had happened, once you'd accomplished reaching the right level of data quality, then you were able to bring the analytical toolkit to bear and actually succeed with feature selection. So again, talking with data scientists and zooming in, really trying to learn and understand what specific problems they had day to day, what we heard and realized was that analysts aren't looking at engaging with and actually processing and making sense of the entire catalog. So, 10 gigabytes of data, even across a bunch of different data sources and formats. They're actually working with line items, right? And what they're using those line items to learn about is something that's happening with real people or in the real world, so to speak. So they have to work in the data, in a columnar data store. They're working with rows and columns, right? But actually, what they're interested in is what examples of real world behavior or actual people, right, that they can find in there. But the barrier is that they're not able to really do that and work with the tools in those ways. So they have only raw data. And actually, what they're interested in is the distillation of the real world and how it's represented in the data. So working through that hypothesis cycle, right, of continuous learning and lean strategy, I put together another messy picture and captured on a whiteboard, literally, a first view of how there was a progression in the way that analysts attempt to identify features. And you can see here they're working, initially with data, but actually what they're interested in is what you might think of as objects. And this gets them to higher order constructions. Refining that again through a set of small, quick cycles of understanding the focus and the needs, what we realize is that you can identify how analysts actually want to engage with data. And you can see that that's more in a user-centric or human-centric or a person-centric fashion on the right side of what you think of as the featurization spectrum. Whereas where they are at the moment is more in that data-centric way. All right, so what does this tell us and what does this allow us to do? It gives us a sense of where and how analysts would like to be in the future. So what could we provide of value? Here's some direct quotes again on how this work happened. So really zooming in and taking that activity-centered design perspective, we realized, no surprise, it's a cycle, it's an iterative process. And specifically, there's cleaning that happens, right? So there's some work with the data, but then they're building a model, but then they realize that the data is not complete. And so they go back and they rework with the data again, and then they re-update the model, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What we thought we could do was leverage that simplified readout of capabilities. And you can see here that we're showing the way that initially we had thought the first pair of explore and wrangle capabilities was focused on data quality, while the second pair, analyze and augment, were focused on features. We began to suspect that if we could make featureization, feature engineering, feature selection, feature-related capabilities visible and apparent in that first set, right, with exploration and wrangling, that might in fact be highly valuable, and specifically valuable in terms of letting folks work with not just the raw data and the raw attributes, but work in a fashion that was more feature driven or user centric that they wanted to be working, right? So focus on entities and business processes and events and those sorts of things. Taking the broader viewpoint, what's happening in the space overall, again, what we could see is there actually did seem to be movement towards user-centric engagement with data across the space. So other products, competitors, complementary tools, et cetera, were maybe moving in a similar sort of direction. And we were able to identify some of from tracking the feature releases and the descriptions of product and what we knew about. And from using these other tools, we were able to track some specific examples of that. So entity-centric navigation and event linkage across data sets in Platform. We ourselves have been doing a lot of semantic search and enrichment, right, to build out our augmentation capability. And then there were narratives around, for example, cognitive computing and natural language interaction from IBM. So in that product planning and portfolio management sense, we identified a whole set of feature-based capabilities, right? Certain operations, specific functions for wrangling and exploration and analysis, the ability to do feature recognition and then feature-based enrichment. We identified a whole set of ways that this would manifest in the product. And we were, again, able to map that and depict that in that summary sense, right, showing its relation to the insight cycle by suggesting, oh, we'll actually build out capability now for featureization. So that original self-generated viewpoint, that workflow that we've modeled as a cycle, we'll begin to address that. And then as a peek ahead, we were beginning to see some connection and correspondence between what was happening downstream or later, specifically under the heading of modeling, right? We knew that we had been empowering modeling, but we were beginning to see this may be, in fact, a rich area of opportunity to explore in the future. So over the next couple of versions, for the next few releases, if you will, right? We actually added a whole set of feature-related or feature-driven or feature-centric capabilities, features, and functions. Cycle time on this was about 6 months. So you can see we're getting faster, and we're able to zoom in and achieve clarity and drive decision-making and be specific about the timing and the momentum, the direction and the momentum we build. So cycle time was, again, about 6 months. All right, so what next? In that customer-centered viewpoint, what we knew and had learned and were seeing increasing evidence of was that data science was strongly focused on modeling, right? So there was a broader set of what you think of as success outcomes for data science than traditional analysts, and that included things like data products. But it felt like the real spotlight or center of gravity for data science was around modeling. So using that customer-centered viewpoint, we decided that we would do opportunity assessment, and then if the opportunity was suitable enough or substantial enough, we do product discovery around modeling. So again, from working directly with customers, we had learned that and had clear evidence that and could describe the cycle of modeling itself. And so here again is a verbatim quote that says essentially, how does this work iteratively? You don't necessarily know what changes you need to make in the data until you build the model, but once you build the model, then you know that you actually want to change the analysis that you're doing. However, that doesn't happen until you start building the model, and then you have to begin the cycle again. And so we were able to model the modeling cycle itself. And here's a look at how we had filled out and expanded the idea of that original customer articulated workflow. So we were able to complement the insight cycle with a depiction of the modeling cycle. And then very usefully, and this was an unlock, we were able to suggest how the two cycles sort of talked to each other, right? And so the features that were key during modeling, if you were able to make any progress with, have any awareness of those in or during the insight cycle, if you were able to essentially get ahead of the curve, then that was very powerful, right? So instead of a backtalk loop from modeling where you had to do a full set of discovery and insight work and then a full set of modeling, and only then would you know and be able to identify the key features. If you could in fact reflect or get ahead of that, then you would have faster and more efficient modeling. Uh, and then likewise, in the other direction of movement, if you will, think about how the two cycles exchange information. Naturally, typically, you were looking at insights that would flow into modeling, but if you could go the other way, that would also be very powerful and valuable. So we characterized modeling in that activity-centered way of the tool sets that were used, the changing nature of the data that was happening, and then there were some very specific instances where um, new functions, right, were being used to advance specific parts of the modeling cycle itself. So you'd have machines evaluate and interpret experimental results as opposed to that being a purely manual process. And this led us to the notion of, or this helped to spotlight the idea of automation. And so if you could automate any of the specific tasks, so selecting the data, prepping the data, choosing the modeling methods, setting and managing the parameters, executing the experiments, evaluating itself, that would be very powerful and useful. Again, from that customer-centered view, we were able to look at and see, remember, this is a zone of overlap, right? And so the cycles talk to each other, the cycles of activity. We're able to see and build a picture of how the discovery cycle and the modeling cycle came together. And that was actually around that sort of center point of exploratory analysis, where you were identifying features and understanding the relationships between features now. So not just looking at the raw data, but you actually had advanced and you were looking at and understanding and modifying the relationships between features. So we could map out the functionality there and say essentially, oh, we think there's a couple of stages of modeling and how does that work and what does that look like? And then where does it lead, right? So eventually you're doing large scale feature engineering and model tuning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? You have the final predictive model, but how do you get there? It's this blended set. We were also able to see and characterize sort of the larger cycle, right? And be more specific because we had visibility and voice of customer and research that showed us, well, we can capture the data cycle, we can capture the discovery cycle, we can identify the activities. We know how they're interrelated in the modeling cycle, and we can also look ahead to when, where, and how these models surface in applications. And you can see there we've suggested the cycles talk to each other in the sense that there's a typical flow forward of things like data and insights and models, but actually those later cycles surface the dependency on or the center of gravity, right, through interconnection with the earlier cycles around things like features, data enrichment, and then in the case of actual deployed applications, most of those are focusing on vectors, right? And so when you're in that training and inference, right, stage of a truly machine intelligence driven application, actually what you're manipulating there, and often many cases is a vector. So from the planning and portfolio management viewpoint, what did we decide to do? We were able to identify a path forward so we could essentially chart a roadmap and be specific about which features and functions would fall under which stage of that roadmap and when, where, and how they would have value. So in the projected evolution of a modeling offering, what would show up when and where. We characterize and capture that in a simple fashion, right? A summary fashion by suggesting, well, V3 versus V4. So our product, the next, right? The next wave of capability will be initially this, focused on building the baseline model and exploratory analysis as a complement, and then subsequently we'll work on and provide you with the ability to build a complex model and do robust feature engineering and model tuning and deployment. This was also the chance for us to look at and capture and distill the entire landscape, if you will, and then connect not just the competitor products that we had been tracking, right, or the related products, but actually identify and talk about categories or characterize a bucket, right, of products. And so we had a shorthand around the difference between a discovery workbench, which provided a specific set of user or customer capabilities, versus a data integration tool versus an analysis workbench. And then we could ladder up and see the scale relationships that existed between stuff that was in the market. And so they were very large analytics platforms, right? And you can see some of the regular names there. And then there were even larger scale, what we were calling application foundries. And so if you think about, for example, Azure, IBM, AWS, right? We could see and talk about the different levels of scale and capability and how that was reflected in the landscape of offerings, right, that was currently available. Cycle time on this was 12 weeks from opportunity assessment to the final decision, if you will, right, that we made during the product and portfolio planning stage. And we, in fact, decided not to invest specifically. So we said, we're not specifically going to build anything here because the nature of the modeling activity that's happening is looking very domain driven. And it's not a case of what feels like a suitable opportunity for us. So if not modeling, what then? By this time, it was obvious that the spotlight, if you will, right, that we wanted to address might be actually tuned to a different aspect of the landscape. And specifically, we might look at machine learning. And that was because it seemed to be a good example of clearly new, right? A new emerging space, if you will. And so it looked like it had gone through the inflection point on the S curve where the right velocity and speed of change, right, and build out of capability would be happening for us. And this is a zoom in on one of the hype cycles that was current at the time. The state of the discourse, if you will, was very emerging spacey around machine learning. And actually, at this point in time, it looked like the big data space and some of those model management tools were in a different stage. And so, given our business strategy, right, and what we regarded as sources or potential places where there were opportunity, machine learning looked to be a good place to focus in on. And so, we turned the opportunity assessment lens to looking at that specifically. And again, another S curve. What you could see was that machine learning was at the right stage, if you will, right, of evolution around how technology spaces move from, and this is another Wardley mapping reference, right? The different zones of, custom built to rapidly defining products, right, into commodities. Machine learning looked like it was right at the beginning of that inflection point. And thus, if we thought about the role that machine learning might play within the growing Oracle Cloud ecosystem, because again, Oracle is shifting a lot of its core business applications from original delivery model, right, to a cloud delivery model. It felt like it was pretty clearly the case that there would be need for commodity services, if you will, right, specifically in terms of machine learning. And so since we had been productizing machine learning across a couple of recent Oracle acquisitions in the marketing cloud and a few other of their new cloud suites, we had had enough experience with and visibility into the demand and the pull for machine learning capability that we could look ahead and see that there will be more of this happening, right, specifically within the Oracle ecosystem. And so it's potentially a case of an infrastructure service that we might provide. But again, that's not a product, that's just an opportunity. So what specifically would we do? In this case, I'm going to give you a peek at the proposal or the outline for a machine learning service. The genesis for this actually was maybe a question you've been wondering about, which is, well, who and where were the customers? In this case, we ourselves were a good example of a customer. Because again, within that Oracle ecosystem and powering a whole set of business applications, we had seen and identified the need for machine learning more broadly, not just within our own group, but through productizing machine learning and a couple of other Oracle acquisitions. And so this is an engineering leader who says, well, we should just build this in relationship to or in response to some of the horizon scan that I was offering at the time, right? And so Amazon had just landed its machine learning offering. And then this engineering leader says, well, we should do one of these, right? We framed the opportunity for this and the search for specific product capability in terms of its impact on the data landscape overall within Oracle. And so you can see here we had said we have a fair amount of experience, and what we're seeing now is what you might think of as product native machine learning. So within the traditional enterprise data space, There's a set of specific machine learning techniques that are showing up within a core bounded set of products. However, if you look out to the big data horizon, and then this is when we thought IoT was going to be a substantial driver of data volume and data complexity. Uh, when you look out to the coming complexity and quantity of the data landscape, what you can see is that potentially an Oracle machine learning service would cover that whole landscape, right? So it will be high leverage, high value, and high impact. So we mapped out the relevant offerings and capabilities in the market now, and this is another one of those classic whiteboard sort of messy picture exercises within one of those hypothesis cycles. So this came together very quickly. We were able to identify a value prop, right? So provides machine learning capability across cloud offerings for the expanded data landscape, combining different types of data, right? Has value in terms of the the leverage around data gravity, helps complete analytical pipelines across tool boundaries. And then for customers specifically, it offers a whole host of benefits. So it's easy, it's portable, right? It shows up specifically in Oracle product contexts for different sets of users. And then we can represent when, where, and how the machine learning service might actually manifest in terms of products, right? And we can suggest it ends up being the center of quite a broad set of applications and usage. So from the planning and management view, right, what does that look like? Well, we define the offering as this. It's a standalone product service, right? It's integrated with relevant cloud offerings. You can white label it specifically across different categories of Oracle, right? There'll be a collection of Oracle specific accelerators. And so we've been tracking things like the R Python packages and libraries that were used to do machine learning. And we foresaw a good mapping of Oracle specific ML accelerators. And then in that roadmap sense, well, what would we do first? We had a readout of essentially the baseline set of capabilities that we would offer. So how would we support model evaluation and model training, publication? And then this also gave us, going back to that larger view of the landscape and the whole cycle of machine intelligence, this also gave us a sense of when, where, and how there might be a new product category emerging. So discovery workbenches we knew and had been building tooling for. Machine learning services felt like the next step. And then something that was quite interesting, actually quite compelling, was the question of what would happen if you combine those. And so was there a new product category to be foreseen around discovery and modeling platforms, which combined discovery capability and modeling? So we could identify a set of new capabilities and new product categories, since we had that distilled customer-centered model of how the different cycles worked. And then in addition, not just for us, but for the capability overall, what we could see essentially was that this would be working at and addressing what you might think of as a different layer, right, of the technology stack and of the technology capability lens that had shaped and was driving and was visible across the whole space. And so I joked, this is a swim deeper moment, which folks who know Odell Lake may remember and recognize. So then what investment happened? This here is a distillation of a couple of the ways that this capability manifests. So there's the machine learning research group, folks that we've been working with, right? And they were offering services within the Oracle family. There's the acquisition of a machine learning platform, that's datascience.com. You can see that's dated 2018. There's the launch of a machine learning cloud service and then Oracle AI Cloud Platform Service. So the cycle time on this, the strategy piece was actually quite quick. It was just about 4 weeks. And then half jokingly, I say it only took 2 years to prioritize and actually make that happen out in the real world. But the strategy loop itself was quite quick. So what next then? In terms of opportunity assessment, we had begun to look at what we would think of as automation potential. So following up on what we were hearing and seeing from customers and in the space overall, we were looking at automation potential and specifically automation across a broader set of the different cycles that we had seen. So not just discovery, but modeling, and then also in the application deployment space, right? We were also looking at the broader machine intelligence value chain. And so you can see here we'd extended that model to look at operationalizing machine intelligence. And that means actually embedding and changing business process and business operations around machine intelligence. So not just creating and deploying an application and then sustaining that through monitoring and training, right? Keeping the models up to date, but actually what happened when you introduced that application, right, or those applications into, if you will, the real world within the business, right? And then you were tracking and monitoring, right, and changing the nature of the business itself. And we were also looking at, again, following up on that notion of maybe changing the layer at which we were providing capability or having impact. We're looking at swimming even deeper, if you will, and considering data pipelines. And so there are cycles and there's a cyclical progression if you're considering the data layer. And folks who are familiar with the space will know that, ETL and analysis and training and all of that are some of the concepts that are used to organize that space. At this point, I had stepped away, and so this was some of the concluding work that I had done, specifically wearing that strategy hat and trying to drive the strategy discourse. So it's useful to switch focus, if you will, and then follow up on where we started at the beginning and actually talk about the outcomes. So I want to turn the lens to suggest now let's look back retrospectively and actually consider what happened in the space overall. And I want to do that from the level of the strategy. So when, where, and how do we see outcomes, and what were the outcomes of the decisions that we made in the strategy sense, but also in that guiding product sense, right? And then in terms of the business strategy. So if you remember, we had said, well, for our group and for our unit, the questions that we needed to answer were around analytics products for emerging spaces. That was our business strategy at the time. Because I think it's key to always begin with customers and then use the customer-centric lens. I think what you can see when you look at the current state of the space is that that map and that model that had been heavily customer driven and focused on activities in the machine intelligence value chain, it's ended up being baked and reflected into a lot of what's happening and being done now. And so I captured from Oracle's cloud analytics descriptive materials these two readouts. And one of those you can see is essentially a subset of the customer landscape, and the other is not shown as a cycle, but as a rendering of essentially the workflow or the stages that are going through there. And what you'll see is a ton of correspondence between what we found and built into that activity center view of the machine intelligence value chain and what's described and identified under the heading of self-service analytics for data scientists, right? Or augmented, augmented analytics, right? That are used for those different customer groups. And then if you look down at that workflow there, you'll see the classic progression, from preparation and model building, exploration, sharing, and consumption, which is that operationalization stage. So the customer view itself, it looks like held up and is still, in fact, directly powering and informing the strategic decisions that are being made about product that is either in market or is coming to market, and then how those products cohere together across the portfolio. From a zoomed in product sense, remember we built, right, a couple of versions of product. In this case, the big data discovery tool went through about 6 releases, and you can see that's a quick screenshot showing the 1.6 release. And then essentially those capabilities were folded into what's identified now as Oracle Analytics and Oracle Analytics Cloud. And if you zoom in, you'll see in that left-hand list there quite a few examples of the functionality or the capability buckets that we had identified surfacing specifically within the new umbrella construct of the Oracle Analytics Cloud. And what's maybe worth highlighting is that I think that shows or reflects what we had identified as when we were just characterizing wave 1 of visual discovery and analysis tools. The longer view, which was tools in the segment, might eat BI market share, right, in terms of increasing their own capability, right, for reporting and some of the stuff that was known as structured analytical work from the traditional business intelligence landscape. And that might allow you to capture a certain new customer group and or provide the sort of base of the ladder for new businesses that were growing. And I think actually what ended up happening is that that matchup of capabilities was correct and accurate, but it was the larger, more established category of analytics platforms that ended up incorporating some of the new capabilities that we had identified and foreseen as being relevant from that visual discovery and analysis wavelength. So the end destination is the same, but as they say, the journey to get there ended up looking a little bit different. What about the new category? So again, we had said we think discovery workbenches are a new category, and here's how we'll define their capabilities. Just one of the outcomes that's worth tracking in this space was for Platfora. And so Workday bought Platfora for about 200 million. This was in 2016. And you can see there, if you zoom in, some of the description, the verbiage that explains it. It says specifically, this is, in relation to capturing operational data, right? And it's in relation to the investment that Oracle is making and had been making. So the new category, I would say, yes, is and was viable, and it was viable enough that folks would make a substantial or significant acquisition of a related or a parallel product, which provided a subset of capability in order to essentially deliver or follow through on the product itself. And then how did the category evolve? So did we see correctly the way that the category itself would change over time? So if you remember, we had said we see wave one, we see wave two coming. We think this is what wave two looks like. How can we define wave two? And so several of the characteristics that we identified, I think specifically were reflected in the evolution of Platfora. So when Platfora got purchased, there was discussion about what were the drivers for this. And so you can see that the key capabilities are, it's a discovery platform, includes data prep and visualization. It supports exploratory analysis, and then it's doing it at that next level of scale. So that whole business corpus scale, right? So petabyte level scale. And then the look ahead for Platfora at the time of the acquisition, so that note about future releases you can see is towards machine learning capabilities. And then you can think of what it's offering, right, as a combination of tools like Trifacta and Zoom Data. And so that's supporting the new sort of the new world, the new school version of data engineering, right? And data engineering specifically to power insights coming from the discovery cycle. So that feels like it's essentially not our marketing copy, but it's a good readout of where we had seen wave two going. And then another product that we had looked at was Datamir or Datamir. And remember, I had suggested that in that opportunity space, we were tracking on things like automation. So when, where, and how could you automate within the discovery cycle or the other cycles? And then what, if any, opportunity existed in data pipelines? And so you can see if you look at, this is from 2019, Datamir's direction, they chose to pivot away specifically from the Hadoop space and track more closely towards customers, so to support the clear direction of movement and need in terms of customers and not specifically tie themselves to a specific technology. And they were looking at doing automated data transformation. So I think that's a good example of combining those two opportunity areas, automation, data pipelines, and how that customer-centered view could be a good driver or leverage for their decision. So they said, we'll take money and we will pivot. So we'll change the whole footprint or focus of our product. And then in terms of that category for maybe discovery and modeling platforms, so that new product category, what happened there, if anything? This is from just 2 years ago, so this is 2022. Alteryx acquired Trifacta, and that was a $400 million deal. So I feel like that bucket of capabilities that we had identified and that bridge across those two cycles was something that we had seen, and that the example of the acquisition where Alteryx acquires Trifacta is a good indicator of the fact that there was validity, right? Or that new category made sense as well. All right, so I hope what you feel like you've seen is how that consistent customer-centered perspective, using the customer-centered toolkit, right, to be a North Star and a source of gravity, has offered good clarity, appropriate speed, savvy timing, the ability to sustain and manage momentum, and then genuine impact, not just in a customer sense, but in a product sense and in a business sense. And that's how the customer-centered product strategy cycle and seeing and working through the cycle in a customer-centered fashion can be a bridge from your ideas, right, to achieving or realizing your aspirations. Thanks very much for listening. I welcome thoughts, comments, and feedback. Please find me.